Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show. I'm your host George Elek, and as we look ahead to day one, the Saturday of the Dublin Racing Festival, I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Holding and Dan Overall. Great weekend racing always, this Andy. We're recording this about 1 o'clock on the Thursday, so a couple of hours after final decks have landed. What are your first thoughts?
Where's Gaelic Warrior? That was my first thought. Let's call a spade here. Nicky Henderson gets a lot of bad press for right or wrong reasons about one or two of his shufflings of the pack, and the way he treads. He doesn't want to sort of risk his horses in certain races, and it can sort of lead the media up the garden path a little bit. But I think Willie Mullins and connections there take the biscuit with this one. It's just like, I can't believe they've left it to the last minute, and they all of a sudden decided, you know what? I think we'll wait till Cheltenham or whatever. I mean, all week they said Gaelic Warrior is going to run against Marine Nationale. Now he doesn't run. I mean, what even bother just making yourself potentially look a bit of a laughing stock, really? To be honest, I just don't get it. I get why they're not running, but don't put yourself out there for abuse.
What do you think? But Andy, it's interesting this because it's something that. I think around Constitution Hill, it's brought this conversation into the mainstream about horses being put away, and us not seeing superstars enough. A kind of a combination of a fear of defeat and how much the national hunt season now revolves around Cheltenham Festival. Like, what do we have to do to basically stop this from being the case, where generally we have to wait for March to see Titans up against each other, whether they're British horses or Irish horses, and even then, it's not always the case.
I personally haven't got a problem with it. I don't know what Dan thinks. Sometimes I'd rather wait to the Cheltenham Festival. It's the pinnacle. It's the Olympics of our sport. You'd like to see the big races take place. If you've had a slightly watered down version of it at another track before, and it does sort of take the edge off it. You like to see the race we've all been waiting for at the meeting that it means the most. So, like I say, I haven't got a problem with Marine Nationale, Gaelic Warrior potentially clashing in the Arkle, but just don't say you're going to run at Leopardstown. It's just. There was obviously clearly no intentions of running, as far as I could see, because it was a chance to find out whether they have got an Arkle horse or they're going to go down the Turners route, which has been the thought process ever since he won at Limerick. I just think it was misleading. Punters, and I'm sure one or two punters have lost money on it because they've read between the lines and they're backed up perhaps Gaelic Warrior for the Arkle off the back of it. I know David Jennings, for instance, in Racing Post, he tipped up Gaelic Warrior for the Arkle based on the fact that there's a potential for Gaelic Warrior to beat Marine Nationale, and he's on a good bet. So I just think in this instance they could have got at it in a slightly different way.
Dan, you're flying out to Dublin tomorrow afternoon. Obviously, from not a punting perspective, but from a spectacle perspective, you've been frustrated to see that we're not getting that big clash tomorrow. Where do you sit on this discussion?
Well, yeah, very disappointed. I think on my notes I had, what a race, clash of the weekend, really. It was probably the race I'm maybe not looking forward to backing in the most, but maybe as a spectacle it would have been interesting. Two probably of the top, if not the top novice chasers going into the spring festivals would have clashed. It would have been a rare treat, I would have said, but the quotes coming out were along the lines of Faclie Vega has been working really well. We thought we'd give him the chance. So what you read into that, make your mind up. But I mean, and what we've seen in Supreme and what we've necessarily seen over fences, I wouldn't be in a rush to back Faclie Vega against Marine Nationale. I'm sure a few loyal Faclie Vega fans will back that up. But it's disappointing. In a way, I think we might get Gaelic Warrior versus Factor File now in the 2 mile 5 race on the Sunday, which again, that will be a decent race in of itself. But I understand the frustration. I think to a certain extent, this is why the likes of Nicky maybe don't say that much anymore. Because if they do say something and something does happen to crop up, they come out public enemy number one. I'm not necessarily sure it was intentional to go down this way, but it doesn't look great. And as you say, there are going to be a few burnt fingers, especially for Gaelic Warrior, for the Arkle backers.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get into the racing in just a second. We're going to go through the card race by race. But before we do, Dan, what have you got planned in Dublin? What are you doing in the evenings? I don't care about the racing. What are you doing? How are you going to enjoy the local hospitality?
Yeah, well, I've heard very good things about this weekend. I haven't actually been to Leopardstown since Footpad won an Arkle trial, so it's been a few years since my last visit. But I've heard very good things. Luckily, I have a local Dublin tour guide to take me around, show me around the houses of an evening, and luckily I'm not flying back till Monday afternoon, so I've given myself plenty of time to soak it all in, enjoy, and maybe enjoy it a bit too much.
What a place it is! Absolutely love it. We've got Johnny Ward joining us tomorrow for day 2, the Sunday preview. Who knows his way around Dublin after dark, so maybe you can ask him for some advice as well. But let's get into the racing, and as ever, we're going to be going through the cards as they are on the oddschecker app and the oddschecker site. Make sure you do download the app for the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, place terms, and Andy's tips, amongst other tipsters across sports, straight to the app every single morning. But starting with the 120, this is the novice hurdle over the extended 2.5 miles, so 2 miles 6. And Predator's Gold is a 7-4 favourite ahead of Galopin at 7-2. Jet Taurus 9-2. I Will Be Bay is 11-2. 10-1 Stellar Story and 20-1 Dancing City. Thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, my thoughts are that I think Predator's Gold has got an excellent chance of booking his ticket to Cheltenham and possibly go down the Birmingham route or Ballymore route, whichever way you want to look at it. Always struggle with the different names of these big races nowadays. But to my eyes, he ran in the best novices hurdle run either side of the Irish Sea, particularly over 2 miles anyway. That race was won by Colwell Potter, the Grade 1. I think it was on day 1 of the Leopardstown Christmas meeting. It was running in filthy conditions, it deteriorated throughout the day, and it was basically survival of the fittest. Colwell Potter was really strong in the latter stage of that race, having jumped well and travelled nicely throughout. He raced handy, and Predator's Goal was the only one who could go with him. I like the fact that the front two, good horses that they are, pulled 38 lengths clear of down memory lane. Now, I know winning margins can be accentuated on soft or deteriorating heavy ground, which undoubtedly that race was. But then you go back and you look at the horses that were literally punch drunk coming out of the back straight, horses like Absurd, an Ebor winner, Daddy Longlegs, an impressive winner of a novices hurdle, and I think actually went off favourite for that race. And then you chuck in the likes of the Big Diana, who was third in a Grade 3. I mean, these were no muppets. They were absolutely, completely out on their feet, turning for home. So I came out of that race thinking I desperately want to follow the first two in that race, whatever race they run in next time. Obviously, we Colwell Potter, the cloud under him at the moment, not the horse itself, but obviously the ownership and where he's likely to go and whether he even makes Cheltenham. You can't do anything with him from an anti-post perspective in any race at Cheltenham at the moment, unless you're on non-run and no bet. So my advice here would be, and I've actually done this today on oddschecker, it'll go up on my oddschecker page today. My advice is to back Predator's Gold, anti-post for the Birmingham at 12-1 non-run and no bet, and also back him at the same price for the Albert Bartlett, because this race over 2 miles 6 throws up a kind of quandary, doesn't it, if you do win it? Which race do you go for at the festival? Minella Kakuna won it 2 years ago. He went down the Albert Bartlett route, whereas Gaillard de Mesnil won it the year before. He went down the old Ballymore route when he finished second to Bob Ollinger. So it depends how impressive you are, what kind of performance you put in, depending on which way Connect can see it. But I do think Predator's got to win this because I just think he's too good. I think he's too quick. Because I don't think this will be a searingly run gallop. There's only 6 runners. I'd imagine Stellar Story might toot along in front, but they won't go a ridiculous gallop, and I think it'll come through a little bit of a foot race from 2 out to the line. I think Predator's Gold has just got far too much speed. Not as though he doesn't stay, because I mean he's already won over 2-3. So yeah, he's got plenty of tactical speed for 2, but he is a 2.5 miler, maybe 3 miler, we don't know. But all in all, I expect him to win. Paul Townend's rided him. He's expecting him to win. And I think the main danger will probably be I Will Be Bay, who made light work of a good horse, a Gordon Elliott's called My Trump Card. Any horse that beats My Trump Card on heavy ground has got to be a good horse. So I've got it between those two, but my meeting starts off in the worst possible fashion if Predator's Gold doesn't win this.
Well, Predator's Gold, as you say, for the Birmingham, formerly the Ballymore, is currently 12-1 best price. You can see at the top of the grids on oddschecker which firms are non-run and no bet, and you get 365 a 12-1 there, and the same price for Albert Bartlett as well, both non-run and no bet there. So that would be the firm you want to go to if you're going to follow Andy's advice. And 7-4 best price for the race at William Hill. Dan, how do you see it?
Well, as Andy mentioned, this can be a bit of a tricky race because you do get Albert Bartlett types and you get your Ballymore types clashing here, obviously, over this new 2 mile 6 trip. I think they made the change in 2018. I think since then we've had 4 winners go to the Bartlett, 2 to the Ballymore. So evenly enough split. No winners have actually come out of that, interestingly enough. But I think in the Bartlett types, you've got Lachlan, Stella Story, Dancing City. I imagine they'll go down the 3 mile route in time. I think I Will Be By is hard to assess. Looked good on his hurdling debut. Wasn't top class as a bumper horse. Could be good, but I'm not necessarily wholly convinced. I mean, Jatara on ratings would take a lot of beating. Like, she's rated 142 and gets £7. And so theoretically, if she ran to that, it would take a performance of 150 to beat her. But I'm just not convinced. And I just kept coming back to Predator's Gold like Andy. I think he's got the class edge on a few of these. I love that he was able to run as well as he did over 2 miles when realistically he looked a strong enough stayer over 2 mile free, I thought, in his debut. He ran pretty fresh that day. It was run at a really strong pace. The second one next time out quite easily. And Paul Townend reported afterwards he had plenty left in the tank. So I don't think the 2 mile 6 trip in a small field will be a problem. I just think, like Andy, I can imagine this maybe coming down to a bit of a test of speed at the trip. The ground is probably going to be soft, but not too testing, which I think is probably about what he wants. And he's only a 5-year-old. So I think if he's going to go to any route come Cheltenham, I think it will be the Ballymore, or what used to be the Ballymore. So I think that'll be the way he'll go come March. But I think he's capable of winning this because I think he'll just have a bit too much class and a bit too much speed.
Too much class, too much speed. Predator's Gold, the favourite and the fancy for both the guys in the opener on Saturday at Leopardstown. On to the 150 now, the Spring Juvenile Hurdle over 2 miles, where Storm Heart is 6-4 favourite. Ahead of Masborough at 13-2. Carguess is 7-1 alongside Caliconti, also 7-1. Bunting 10-1. High Wind 10-1. 12-1 bar those. Intello 12-1. The 40-1 bar those, I should say. Dan, we will come to you first next time up, but I am obsessed with these kind of races and Andy Holding because his speed figures normally tell us quite the story. So visually, we've seen what we've seen, Andy, but what are the numbers telling us?
Well, I think the first thing to say about this race is the absence of Salvatore Mundi probably tells us a couple of things. That Willie Mullins perhaps feels as though he's got one better than maybe Salvatore Mundi, or certainly more street-wise, because obviously Salvatore Mundi hasn't run since finishing second to Sergino in that Auteuil listed race. I think it was back in April. The fact that connections of Salvatore Mundi have also got Sergino as well. They've probably looked at what Sergino did at Cheltenham on Saturday and thought, well, is there any point rushing Salvatore Mundi just to get the Cheltenham for the sake of it when we've got a better one anyway? And they'll probably perhaps say if Salvatore Mundi with a run, let's say, in Ireland somewhere for the Punchestown Festival and leave Sergino at home. That's my way of thinking with Salvatore Mundi. So he doesn't turn up. It means then that Willie Mullins has got the main player in the shape of Storm Heart. Now, talk about a difficult one to assess. This is probably one that's definitely going to divide my opinion, because based on his time figure that he did first time out, you couldn't have him on your mind at that price. Yes, I get the fact that he was really impressive from the back of the second last. He really showed a good turn of foot, pinged the last and went miles clear, but his number was absolutely desperate. So much so that a horse that won a 2 mile handicap rated in the 80s ran a quicker time than him later on in the card. The 3 milers on the same card ran a quicker circuit time than him as well. Sir Gerhard and all those kind of horses, Ashdale Bob. So I'm sitting in between two stools with him. I don't really know what to make of him. But being his numbers man, I just couldn't advise him at that price. He might well win because we just don't know how good he could be. He might run in a better race and run a bigger number because he's just a really good horse. But like I say, I just can't advise him on such a mediocre, miserly speed figure first time out. Whereas quite a few of the others who've had one run and looked equally impressive, like High Wind and in Otello, and particular Carla Conti and Carguess have come out a much better race. And at the prices, I do think Carla Conti and Carguess, they probably represent the strongest form anyway coming into this race. Carla Conti's got the quickest time figure, not because of her victory here at Leopardstown over the course and distance, because that was a bit of a muddling affair, granted. But the day when she got the better of Nürburgring, finished second to Nürburgring, I beg your pardon, at Fairy House on Raw Bond Day, that was a very good race. They went quicker than the older horses. which was won by Farron Glory and by Tiupu as well. They ran a much quicker overall and final circuit sectionals. So I thought Calaconti then to win in a slowly run race showed her versatility when she went to Leopardstown. So I think she's probably going to be underestimated here, Calaconti. So I'd probably just make her the slight choice over Carguess, who pulled hard in a slowly run race and yet was still managed to finish second. I think she's probably got a hell of a lot of raw ability. And I think we'll see the better of her in a stronger run race. She reminds me a little bit of Gala Marceau, who chased down Lossy Mouth in this race last year. Similar type, of similar colours. That probably was why I'm thinking that way. But I think she's got a very similar profile. So my strategy here would be to oppose Stormheart. If he wins, he wins. You just get it wrong. And to back Calaconti and Carguess at round about the 7-1 mark there. I think they're both really good value.
Are you backing them both each way? Just 3 places at the moment, obviously, with the 6-4 favourite.
Yeah, I mean, like for instance, on the day, if somebody went 4 places the pair, I probably would back both each. So I can't see them not finishing in the first 4, either one of those two. If they run up to their best form, there's no real reason to suggest they won't. So yeah, a lot depends. But at the moment, for the advice for this podcast, then I'd just say two win-only bets are their respective odds at the moment.
Yeah, Calaconti is best price, standout price, 7-1 with Bet365. Carguess 7-1 with a few firms, 365, Sky Bet, BetVictor, Coral, Betfred, Ball Sports amongst those two. As I say, all firms currently 3 places, but I think probably on the day, especially if there are still the 11 that are there now, you'd see 1 or 2 go 4. Dan, how do you see it?
Really interesting race. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think, like Andy mentioned, Calaconti and Carguess are the form standard based on that grade 2 over the Christmas period. However, I'd say based on the fact that Carguess had plenty of starts in France, Calaconti's had a few runs as well. I'm not sure if they're going to improve enough to be of Triumph Hurdle standard. I think if Ireland's to have a Triumph Hurdle winner, something else is going to have to win this and win it quite impressively. I also agree with Andy that I think Stormheart's way too short. I'm a bit perplexed as to why he is the price he is when there's a few similarly profiled horses, and we know with juveniles they can all take marked step forwards. I wouldn't be interested in him at the price. The Salvatore Mundi factor is interesting because reports that he was behind in his work, obviously the Sesgino factor being in there as well. I think they'll just save him for novice hurdling next season. He still has that intact because he didn't win in France. But the one who doesn't have that option and didn't have that option, I was probably more interested in anyway, is Majbra, who won over in France. So he won't be eligible for novice races next season. So there's every incentive to have him as far forward as possible for this. The reports from home have been pretty good. The form of his win at Auteuil has worked out well. Traditionally a very strong race. It's been won by the likes of Frodon, Porticello, Beau Zenith. So a lot of pedigree and a lot of good winners come out of that race traditionally. And as I say, he's going to be the one who's more forward and has every incentive to be. And while it is going to be a tough task to come and win this on debut for the yard, Ilete Tom hadn't achieved anywhere near the same level of form. And he finished a close-up 3rd in this a couple of years ago. So it is possible. He's from the right connections. I think he's 8-1 currently. I think that's a reasonable each-way price. Obviously, there are a few unknowns, but bearing in mind the price of Stormheart, I think he's kind of making the market for a few of these. So I'd have a partially speculative each-way bet on Marchborough.
Yeah, I'm afraid 13-2 is the best you're getting now, Dan.
There you go.
Since final
Like-minded people
decks have come out, yeah. 13-2 is with William Hill at the standout price as well. So we've got 3 to take on the favourite. Good to hear both agreeing that Stormheart is too short. Majborough for Dan at 13-2, and Carguess and Calaconti both for Andy at 7-1. Dan, will stick with you here for the first. We'll give you first run in the 3rd race on the card, which is the Irish Arkle. Marine Nationale, as we discussed earlier, has been left not unchallenged, but it's not the clash we hoped for. 4-9 best price are out about Marine Nationale. Faclie Vega 5-1, Founder 50, 8-1, Ilete Tom 20-1, Sharjah 40-1, Senesia is 150-1. 6 runners here. Not the greatest betting heat. Dan, can you find an angle for us?
No, as you say, that has kind of left it a bit flat. I mean, it's interesting. Marine Nationale is about the same price he was. Well, actually, not too much of a difference between his anti-pros price when Gaelic Warrior was assumed to be running. So he hasn't really contracted that much. So I guess the field has stood up reasonably well outside of Gaelic Warrior. In Facile Vega, obviously, they're renewing their rivalry from the Supreme, where Marine Nationale was pretty emphatic in bidding him that day. And from the evidence we do have over fences, there's nothing really to suggest that Marine Nationale is going to come back to Facile Vega in that sense. Facile Vega was okay on his chasing debut, jumped reasonably well with work for improvement, and then as he has done previously, very disappointing next time out, and he's a bit on the recovery mission. I think he'll attract support from the market because I think people will be looking for some kind of angle into this. And I think if there is a horse who maybe has the raw ability to beat a Marine Nationale, it would be him. But the ground on the chase course is going to be on the quicker side. We know that's what Marine Nationale likes. And there was nothing you could pick holes in on his chasing debut. Jumped really professionally, just went from fence to fence, travelled like a dream and put the race to bed easily. He'll take an awful lot of beating. I'm sure he'll probably be the linchpin in a lot of accumulators throughout the week. And what I'd like to normally find something at a price to take on a favourite, in this case, I'm just with Marine Nationale, and I'll probably have him a few doubles and trebles across the weekend.
49 best price, Marine Nationale, as it stands, that is with William Hill. So if you did agree with the guys, you're getting standout best price Marine Nationale in the 225, and you're getting standout best price of the Hills. Predators Gold in the first could be a popular double. Andy, we've also got a without market that I know you're sometimes quite keen on. I'll read it out quickly before we get through to it. It's with Hills as well. Faclie Vega's even money, Founder 50, 13-8. Elek Tom, 11-2. Charge 12-1. Svesier is 40-1. Any angles here?
Yeah, there is. There is an angle. First of all, I agree with Dan. I think Marine Nationale will win this and cements his position at the head of the market. I'm personally quite delighted that Gaelic Warrior doesn't actually turn up here, despite what we said early on in the programme about them jumping ship, because he would have scared me stiff if he'd have gone down this route, because he's the only horse capable of ruffling the feathers of Marine Nationale over any distance. I think he's that good. He's actually run the quickest speed figure that we've got so far this season as a novice when he won at Limerick. So I think he's a bit of a freak, Gaelic Warrior. Hopefully we'll see them clash at some stage, but for this year it looks as though they'll go their own separate ways, and that should really leave the door open for not only Marine Nationale to win here, but to win at the Cheltenham Fest as well, which is the main sort of hope this season anyway. So yeah, I'm hoping to see fireworks from Marine Nationale. It's interesting to see how this race pans out, because the likes of Faclie Vega and Founder 50, they like to go forward. That's just the way that they are. It's difficult to hold on to them and to get them to do other things, particularly Faclie Vega. And you just never really know what you're going to get with Faclie Vega. He's good one day, and you think, this is the horse we expect. And then, like we saw here over the Christmas period, he rather takes a little bit of a nosedive backwards. So your guess is as good as mine what Faclie Vega turns up, which makes him a risky proposition if you're backing him in without the favourite market, because he's even money. Whereas Founder 50, who beat him fair and square on the day, is a much bigger price, which is about their reputation rather than actually what they've done on the track. But I do think there's a better bet than those two to finish second to the favourite here. I'm going to pull up Elek Tom, based on the fact that he represents the Gaelic Warrior form line from Limerick. Now, 2 mile 4 on bottomless Limerick ground that day wouldn't have been anywhere near what Elek Tom prefers. I'm not saying he's a good ground horse by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not an overly robust chasing type. I just don't think he's got the scope of the likes of Gaelic Warrior and the horses that ran that day, but he still managed to finish second. He beat 2 good horses in the show of American Mike, and I like the way he's thinking. So it was still a good performance. Now, based on his number that day, even in finishing a flattered 6 lengths second to the favourite, he still comes out top of our figures here, even better than Marine Nationale, what he did on debut. So I think he's a very interesting bet, not only at the prices and on form, but on how this race is likely to be run, i.e. Faclie Vega and I think Founder 50 will be ridden to try and win the race. They'll be after Marine Nationale. They're not just going to let him have a solo or have it easy. That's just not the way that both Mullins or Elliott go about the business. They'll just want to win. But I do think Elek Tom probably ridden off the speed, like he often is. And we know that he's picked up the pieces and won here at this meeting before, if you recall, when he won the Grade 1 here several years ago when others blew out. So I've got a sneaky feeling that could happen again. So 11-2, was it, without the favourite you quoted?
Correct, yeah, spot on.
11-2. I think that's a really good bet. So more than one way to skin a cat in that race. You can back Marine Nationale 4-9 if you so wish, but I prefer to go the without a favourite route with Elek Tom.
Yeah, so there, Elek Tom 11-2 in that without market. So that's with William Hill. Also 20-1 if you didn't want to back Elek and Andy each way. That's just a quarter of the 4 with Bet Victor, Coral, Quinn Bet, and Bet Goodwin.
I don't think that's not the biggest mythical in the world either. I mean, stranger things happen, you know. It's a horse race at the end of the day. Horses can make mistakes, you know. The other two could easily bustle up Marine Nationale. You just don't know what's going to happen. I say 20 to 1 each way, or just either way. I think Elek and Andy certainly outrun those odds by a mile.
Great stuff, strong one there from Andy. On to the listed handicap hurdle, the 3 o'clock, where Canal End is the 5 to 1 favourite, ahead of Panda Boy at 6 to 1. Fine margin, 7 to 1. 9 Graces, 10 to 1. Shanbali Kid, 12 to 1. Will Do, 12 to 1. Music Atara, Garth Carl, both 12 to 1 as well. 16 to 1 bar those. We've got Sky Bet going 7 places as it stands. There'll be loads of places available for this one. 24 in it as it stands. Now, Dan, any fancy for you at this stage?
Yeah, now we've gone from pretty small field tactical affairs to a 24-runner 3-mile handicap. So that's the contrasting races we get at the DRF. But a couple in here, I'd say that make the most appeal to me. The first one is Fine Margin towards the head of the market at 7 to 1. I think you just go back to that Haydock performance on his debut for the yard after a break. I thought that was a really impressive run. No shame at all in sandwiching. Obviously, the Slate Lane, who was clearly plotted out for that race exceptionally well. It's a shame we won't see him race again. And obviously, you had the long walk winner in Crambo back in 3rd. And then behind them, like, they were pretty well clear. You had a host of very reliable top 3-mile handicappers in Britain. That's as solid a handicap piece of form I think you'll find. And the fact that he ran so well in it, given the circumstances, I thought was really impressive. Still completely unexposed over trips of 3 miles in these big races. I think he's got an exceptional chance. And to be honest, I'd make him the favourite in my opinion. And then at a slightly bigger price is Will Do, who looked pretty much set to be the second string for Gigginstown and Gordon Elliott. I was tracking the jockey bookings earlier, and Sam Ewing was initially jocked on, and Jack Kennedy was on Search for Glory, but they've switched. Interestingly, very late on, they switched. Jack Kennedy now rides Will Do, and he's a horse I actually have quite a lot of time for. I think he's a progressive staying novice hurdler early on this season, and he was really well backed to win on his handicap debut at Navan on really deep ground over 3 mile 1. You go through that race, he went well for a long way, and I think in the end, the effects of only having his previous run a couple of weeks before, very inexperienced still. It's only his 4th run over hurdles. I think that just caught him out. He shaped better than the bare result, finishing 6th that day. He was basically still bang there until the final furlong. So I think you can forgive that. And to my mind, he went through the race better than Canal End, who currently heads the market. So I think there's a bit too much of a discrepancy in the prices there, given that Will Do is equally, if not more, unexposed. I think the fact that Jack Kennedy rides is interesting. Connections won this race with Dallas to Picton a few years ago, who was also a novice. I don't think a mark 128 is beyond him. And I think the slightly easier test here on ground that isn't as deep will suit. So at 12 to 1, I'd say Will Do would probably be my main bet in the race.
Yeah, Will Do 12 to 1 with Bet365, and William Hill and Fine Margin is standout best price 7 to 1 with 365. Andy?
Yeah, I agree with Dan with Fine Margin. I don't think you can get away from the fact that, you know, he split 2 good horses at Haydock. Basically puts Crambo in here off a mark of around about 130, so he'd be odds on to win that off that mark. So I know it's not as straightforward as that, and it never works out like that, but it does give him a fine chance of making amends. I do, however, just slightly prefer Leopardstown form. It is a specialist track, and if you get horses that run well here time and time again, they often do so again. And I do like that Geath Kiel 9 Graces form line here of the Pertemps qualifier back in December. Now, that normally that Pertemps qualifier attracts around about 30 odd runners, and the winner of the final often comes out of it. You know, you like your Delta Works and your Sada Burleys of yesteryear, who just scraped into 4th and qualified, and then made a mockery of their marks at the festival. I'm not necessarily sure that Geath Kiel or 9 Graces are standout contenders for the Pertemps, but they certainly ran a reasonable enough time figure. It was interesting that that race, courtesy of Foxy Jackson, took them along at Good Gallop, was run 3 seconds quicker than Irish Point's Grade 1 victory on the same card. And the final circuit sectionals weren't too shabby either. So I think that race is probably a little bit better than I thought at the time. I thought Foxy Jackson ran really well. He ran a really good cross-country trial, I thought. I think he's a player for that race at the festival. And of the 2, I thought 9 Graces came out of the race with a great deal of credit, because she was held up off the speed that day and came from a long way back to finish 3rd. So if I was going to put them in a pecking order today, for Saturday's race. I'd probably go 9 Graces to turn the form around with Gaelic Warrior, but because their odds are so competitive, let's say, and they're both double-figure quotes, I probably would just suggest maybe just backing them both each way, because I'd be disappointed if one of them didn't get in amongst the main players, whichever they may likely to be. The one I can't quite understand why he's so short in the market is Panda Boy. I do like Panda Boy, and he's very much on my radar for the Grand National. He has been for quite a while, being trained by Martin Brazel. But this is typical Martin Brazel. If you go back many years ago when he won the Grand National with number 6 Valverde, he kept chopping and changing chases, hurdles to try and protect his mark. Now, he's obviously got his chase mark under lock and key, courtesy that run in the Paddy Power chase at the last meeting. So the last thing he wants to do now is go and blow it by winning another chase. So he's obviously just ticking him over between now and Aintree and running him a hurdle. So the tip is there for all to see if you're a Panda Boy fan for the National. But I just don't think he'll have the speed to win this, because he is quite one-paced and he doesn't quicken, and I think 4 miles will suit him, but I couldn't have him in my mind to win this race, and he's like 5-1. So I'd definitely stick a fork in him. I think he's a bad favourite. Definitely think fine margin he's probably the one to beat, but as I said, I think the two from that course and distance run last time, 9 Graces and Gaelic Warrior are the ones I'd concentrate on.
So 9 Graces is 10-1 with Hills, BetMGM and BetUK. They're all 6 places as it stands. And Gaelic Warrior is 12-1 with 365 Hills and the other 2 firms I just mentioned, as well as Betfred and Unibet, who are 6 places. Or you can take 11-1 for 7 places with Sky Bet, and 9-1 for 9 Graces with Sky Bet as well. On to the 335. It is, of course, the Irish Gold Cup. Galopin de Champs is the 4-9 favourite ahead of Fastorslow at 3-1, Conflated 12-1. Iron Maximus 40-1. Just 4 in here, Andy. Can you find an angle for us for some value?
Not really, no. Unfortunately, there's the betting without the favourite is not going to be any better than betting the favourite anyway. Can't see Conflated or Maximus winning. Should be a straightforward exercise for Galopin de Champs. I imagine Paul Tarnell just got in front to make this really straightforward. He's made the running before. I mean, he was miles clear, wasn't he, when he fell at the last, having made all the running in the old Turners when Bob Ollinger inherited the lucky win. So he's fairly tactically flexible. And the thing about Galopin de Champs is I know he's got beat several times by Fastorslow, and 1 or 2 will hang their hat on that. But they haven't been at Leopardstown. The only time he's got beat by Fastorslow has been when he's gone right-handed, and I don't think he's as good over right-handed as he's going left. But he's brilliant at Leopardstown. He's 4 for 4 over the chase track here at Leopardstown. And this is really his domain. This is his patch. Obviously, he's just as good at Cheltenham, but I think if they ran the Gold Cup at Leopardstown, it'd be an absolute stone bonking certainty every time he ran. And the fact there's only 3 competitors against him, he can just do what he likes. So unless that race has taken too much out of him that we don't know, then I can't imagine he'd get beat here. So unfortunately, it's very, very unoriginal. I haven't got any original content to come up with either. So Galopin de Champs, I think he's probably the strongest of the short price favourites as far as I could see on Saturday.
Yeah, 4-9 with BetMGM, BetUK, Paddy Power, and the Betfair Sportsbook. Dan, can you find anything to take that on with?
Well, I think Andy mentioned it at the end. The key factor is, can he keep repeating these unbelievable performances back to back to back? So the last time he put a performance of the ilk that he did over Christmas was at the Gold Cup. And obviously then we saw him not the same horse at Punchestown. Now, maybe he isn't as good right-handed, as Andy mentioned, but there is going to be a point where he might be vulnerable. And to be honest, I thought his best chance of retaining his Gold Cup crown would be if he avoided this race. Thank God he didn't, because it really would be a tame affair without him. But there's going to come a stage where he might not be able to back these runs up, and he will be vulnerable and he will get beat. We've already seen it once. And you look at the likes of your back-to-back Gold Cup winners of yesteryear. Obviously, Best Mate went straight from the King George. He went there fresh. Album Photo only had 1 run in between. So I'm just worried, what has that last run done to him? Because you don't just win Grade 1s by 23 lengths and feel absolutely fine afterwards. It can take a lot out of horses. There's going to be a time where I want to take him on. Fastorslow is only one in here realistically with a chance of doing so. Maybe that chance is probably better at Cheltenham, because I'm not actually sure this is his ideal setup here, especially in a small field. Will Galopin de Champs jumping, may not be under pressure as much because he can go forward in a small field. That was one of my crabs about him going into last year's Gold Cups. I didn't think he was necessarily the best jumper when held up in behind. And to be honest, he wasn't again. But obviously we saw over Christmas that given a more forward ride, he jumps absolutely fine. I may well back Fastorslow to small stakes to beat him, just on the idea that he may be vulnerable one of these days. If Galopin runs up to the form we've seen in the Gold Cup and in the Savills, then he won't be beaten. But it's just a question of can he perform to that level every single time we see him.
And what's your verdict? Where do you come out? I'm probably going to
have a small bet on Fastorslow to beat him. It's not going to be massive stakes because I'd say there's going to be a stage where he's vulnerable, and I'll kick myself if it's at the weekend and I haven't had anything on to beat him.
Fair enough. Yeah, Fastorslow 3-1 best price. That is with Bet Victor. Coral speculative. It sounds like more than a strong one though for Dan there. And then to the penultimate race on the cards. We've got the handicap chase over 2 miles and a furlong. Path de Route 7-2. Favourite here, Solness 5-1. The Folks Tiara 6-1. Madara 6-1. The Big Chap 7-1. Final Orders 10-1. Hen C 12-1. Typical Thomas 14-1. 20-1 bar those. Dan, you can take us away.
Yeah, another interesting handicap. And I think that the top of the market, the one who interests me more is the Folks Tiara. Obviously won over Christmas here, which is a key piece of form with the likes of Path de Roue, who was badly hampered by the winner going a length down when jumping that and then just came down. I'm not sure Path de Roue necessarily would have gone on to beat the Folks Tiara that day because Path de Roue doesn't exactly have a great winning habit. And I think the Folks Tiara is equally unexposed. So I can see him running a big race. The one I'm warming to a big price is Rebel Gold. I think 25-1 is currently the biggest price available. Is 11, which is obviously the concern. But last season was as good as ever. He won the Dan and Joe Memorial Handicap, the biggest 2-mile handicap run in Ireland last season. And he came into this race thereafter. And I just think he left his race behind in the Dan and Joe Memorial. Still ran perfectly fine in this race last year. Went from the front, where I don't think necessarily wants to be the outright leader. He'll be ridden prominently, but I don't think leading all the way was his ideal. Only headed at the last, only beaten 6 lengths. And I think this season, they're working back from this race. Had a spin over hurdles, then ran behind El Fabiolo, where obviously didn't have a chance. I think they've only really had one big handicap target in mind. I think it's this race. He was 7-1 last year. He's 25-1 now, off the same mark, but Cornerstone Walsh takes a valuable £5 off. And we've already seen him have a big 2-mile handicap success this season. He's very good value for that claim. And given he's going to be ridden prominently, we know he performs well at this track based on how he ran in this race last year. With Cornerstone's Walsh £5 claim, he's technically £5 lower than he was this time last year as well for a 6-length defeat. I think everything's in place for a big run, and I say he's a big price as well.
Yeah, 25-1 with all firms there. Most going 4 places. Big price selection there for Dan. Andy, how do you see it?
Yeah, I do remember Rebel Gold in this race last year because I put it up on my column and he finished. Was he 5th in the end? Or was he 5th or 6th? I can't remember now. But he was just out of the frame by 1. So that was a bit of a body blow. Yeah, I could certainly see him in a big price. Good pick by Dan. I hadn't sort of factored him into my equation because of his 2 modest runs so far this season. Several interesting angles in this race. First and foremost, I think Joseph O'Brien quite likes this race because he won it back to back with a Wave of the Sea 2 years ago and 3 years ago respectively, and he's got Solness in this who looks as though he's been saved specifically for this. Course and distance winner here last year in a beginner's chase, and has just had the 1 run so far this term, and that was a good victory against some quality handicappers at Fairyhouse last time out. The fact that he hasn't run 63 days, like I say, leads you to think that he's had this race on his mind for a little while now. It could easily work out to be a Grand Annual horse. Currently, he's 20-1 for that race. But again, if you're just looking at course and distance form, that race that the Folks Tiara won here last time out was 5 seconds quicker than the Founder 50 and Faclie Vega have the same course and distance. They're real trapping on that day. It was the quickest time on the card. So I think that's a really strong form. Whether Path de Roue would have won, I'm not sure. When he got knocked over at the last, wasn't his fault. So a difficult one. Do you go with Solness because you know he's been laid out for it, or do you go with the form of Folks Tiara and Path de Roue? I'd probably suggest that the Folks Tiara form line is the one to be with, and hope that works out. But it is a close call between the two. A lot depends how well Path de Roue jumps, because as he showed again next time out in the beginners at there he is. He's still a little bit wet behind the ears in the jumping stakes. But look, Gavin Cromwell won this race last year with final order, so hopefully he's worked that out, or he's working it out at home. So a trappy old race, that not one I could pin my tail to the donkey to wholeheartedly, because there's so many different angles. But I'd probably suggest maybe the Folks Tiara is the most solid option at 6-1 currently.
Yeah, the Folks Tiara 6-1, as you say, with Bet365. Currently the way to play it for Andy. Would you be back and win only or each way, Andy?
Well, again, how many places are on offer? 4 or 5?
4 currently.
4, yeah, that'd do, yeah. Because the form looks all right. Snake all ran well out of it the other day. He should have won it nicely the week. He made a bad mistake at the second last. So I think that's on balance probably the strongest form coming into it as far as I could see.
Good stuff. On then to the bumper, and a dream to share pops up in the bumper. Was entered to make his hurdling debut back in October. Not seen. Obviously won the Irish and the Cheltenham Champion bumper last year. Pitched up in the bumper again. 5-4 favourite ahead of Redemption Day at 9-2. You ought to know 9-1. The Enabler 10-1. Joystick 16-1. Hens 2 16-1. Jeroboam Machine is 18-1. 33-1 bar those. Andy, fair to say that probably wouldn't have picked this as being the bumper field with you a couple of weeks ago.
No, this is really odd. We're all anticipating him making his hurdling debut somewhere along the line, and he'd be one of the favourites to win the Supreme, and yet all that's been shelved for another day, and we're getting to see him in a bumper, but he's just in a complete and utter different league to this lot. There's some nice promising types in here, but the form of his champion bumper last season is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think there's been a horse out of that race either last season or this season that hasn't won, like Factor File, Captain Teague, Lecky Watson, It's For Me, Captain Cody, Western Diego, No Time Will Tell, Locklin. It just goes on and on. I think even the horses that were beaten half the length of the running have won. Queen's Gamble's a listed winner, Fiercely Proud, Better Days Ahead.
Just to play devil's advocate, isn't that partly just the nature of a champion bumper, where
not necessarily every year. I don't think I can recall a stronger one where everything has won. Even Beachcomber, who was last but one, has won. Westcourt Cove has won. It was absolutely lapped. And the time figure that we got him doing at Punchestown when he beat Tully Hill and King of Kingsfield and A Piece of Heaven and It's For Me, again, is incredibly strong form if you actually go through it, was the quickest bumper time we've ever had in all the times we've been doing bumpers. We normally get the champion bumper somewhere between a 65 and a 70. That day when he won at Punchestown, he did a 78, which is just completely and utterly ridiculous. So he's just a complete and utter freak. So the market will tell you where you are with a dream to share. I think if he goes odds on, and the more money for him, if JP gets involved, then I think the more confident you've got to be. If he slides down, he's sort of nudging towards 7-4, 2-1 on the off, then you think, can smell a little bit of a rat here. So I'd almost be prepared to take shorter and back him rather than the other way around, because it's only lack of fitness that will stop him not winning this.
And how do you, Andy, before we get down to thoughts, how do you assess the others in the in behind the challengers in effect if you do see that price drifting?
Well, they're a nice bunch, but none of them have done anywhere near the figure that the Dream to Share has done. They've all run 40s and 50s, and they've all shown they can crawl around in slowly run races and then quicken a little bit at the end. And Redemption Day is a bit of a nutcase. He's a good horse, but he's definitely a bit screwy. He's a bit keen in his races. That's not always the trait you want. I like the Enabler. I think the Enabler is a lovely horse. He's a real grinder, a proper sort of chaser further down the line. But again, I'll put it this way. I think a Dream to Share wouldn't be out of a place in a hot 1.5 mile group race on the flat. I think he's that good. So, none of these would lay a glove on him in that kind of scenario. So I don't know what Dan thinks, but I just think he'll obliterate these for pace.
Dan?
Yeah, it's the strangest bumper you'll ever see, in that we normally have this as the leading champion bumper trial, and the top two in the market can't run in the race. It really is an odd one, and then even more odd that is a Dream to Share has won a champion bumper and is allowed to run here off basically level weights. Like, no one ever thought of the contingency plan. What if they come back for more? Obviously, just no penalties allowed. So it really is an odd one. And I think Andy's nailed it in the sense that you'll know where you are with a Dream to Share based on the market, because there are doubts about where he's been. Obviously, he has had niggles, he has had setbacks. Otherwise, we would have seen him jump a hurdle by now. But obviously, he has the absolute standout form in the race. And while I'd say that, I'd probably look to play something against him, and just on an each way angle, because obviously he's relatively short and there are those unknowns. And the one I do have a bit of previous with, and I have back for this year's champion bumper, is actually the shortest price of those eligible for the race that running in here, is You Ought to Know. Obviously, he hasn't run for a long time, but I think his form that he did achieve over the summer period puts him right up there with the best of the rest here. So he beat Croke Park by 11 lengths at Kilbeggan. Well, he's since then won a grade 3, admittedly as a bit of a stayer, but that was a sharp test. And I don't think You Ought to Know is necessarily a sharp, real nippy type. I think he's a bit of a galloper who wants a bit of a sterner test, which you'll finally get. Then went to Galway under a penalty, on really well beating a horse called Toto 2, giving him a stone in weight. That horse then went on to win his next 2 starts and was back like he couldn't be beat at Cheltenham earlier in the season, when we haven't seen him since. So clearly I think there was an issue when he ran at Cheltenham, but that is solid enough form. And I think the idea all along was to give him a break. I think that was pretty much nailed on after that second run. I think there was always a bit of a debate whether they'll go hurdling or stick to bumpers. But I think based on what he achieved in those earlier bumpers, they're going to give him the chance to prove he could be a championship caliber horse in this sphere. And I think realistically, of those I can see down the market, I think he's achieved the most to my end. I think he's still got a lot of upside. I think obviously Jody Townend on board rather than Patrick, I don't really have a problem with, because I think Patrick's gone with what he knows in Redemption Day. Obviously, You Ought to Know hasn't had a run for a good few months, which maybe is the unknown. But I think he's the one I like with the upside to maybe go on to Cheltenham in March. A Dream to Share could win this easily, but I think You Ought to Know could be the one to emerge from this with the best deal of credit with an eye to March.
Interesting stuff. You Ought to Know is best price 9 to 1, and there is a without market as well. The 9 to 1 is with 365. You Ought to Know is 4 to 1 without the favourite market up there as well. That's with William Hill. So there we have it. That is day one, the Saturday of the DRF preview with both Dan and to Andy. I'm sure everyone would agree with me to wish Dan the very best and a very fun weekend over. I'm incredibly jealous. But sadly, going to the playground and pushing swings and things like that awaits my weekend instead. But yeah, have a great time, and thank you for joining us. And thank you to Andy as ever. I'm going to be back with Andy and with Johnny Ward recording a Sunday preview tomorrow. So keep your eyes on the oddschecker YouTube channel for that. It should be up on Friday afternoon. In the meantime, thank you to the guys. Make sure you download the oddschecker app for the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, place terms, and Andy's tips amongst other tipsters to the app every morning of racing. Enjoy the racing. Should be a great weekend of sport. Please do ensure that you're gambling responsibly.